This is Alec Baldwin, and you're listening to Here's the Thing from iHeartRadio. Brazen, blunt, unapologetic, these are just a few of the words that describe the unexpected comedy of my guest today, Tim Dillon. Named one of the top 10 comics you need to know by Rolling Stone, this former child actor has released specials on Netflix and Comedy Central and graced the stages of the Glasgow Comedy Festival and South by Southwest. Dillon is also a fellow podcaster. Since 2016, his blend of truth-telling hot takes and controversial opinions can be heard every week on The Tim Dillon Show. Like many who make their living on the road, Dillon was mostly sidelined from touring throughout the pandemic. We spoke about where and how he spent his time during COVID.
I was in Los Angeles, and then I went out to Palm Springs, which is a desert, because if I don't have to be near work, I can be in the desert, so I went out to the desert.
You have a home there, too?
No, I
On your business card, it says Palm Springs.
Yeah.
What part of LA are you in?
Yeah, Beverly Hills.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Beverly, the offices of Tim Dillon, Beverly Hills, Palm Springs, Texas.
New York.
And New York.
Yeah, I went out there, and we were able to podcast and make people laugh on the internet, and thank God, because that helped our sanity, and obviously we're able to monetize that and make money. But, you know, important for comedians is to be funny. It's how we live. We're screwed up people that need an outlet, and thank God we had an outlet.
Well, we're going to get to your background.
Right.
A glorious background you and I share.
A Long Island background.
A Long Island background, which is don't all the most polished and sophisticated.
You know, I know that we're being funny, but maybe that is true.
Maybe it's true.
Maybe it is true.
When you're starting out, you're in an age where you're not a kid.
No.
And everything's not the internet and the way things are now.
Right.
What was your comedy diet when you were growing up? What did you watch?
Well, it was a lot of SNL.
Right.
So it was a lot of SNL. It was a lot of Farley and Spade and Chris Rock and Mike Myers and even the next generation of Molly Shannon and Anna Gasteyer and Sherry O'Terry and Will Ferrell. I loved SNL. I liked Mad TV, which was, was Artie Lang and all these other people. I love sketch comedy. I would watch Carlin and Pryor and Hicks and Kinison and Joan Rivers and all of these people as I was growing up.
So vintage people like Pryor and Carlin.
Yeah, for sure. And I also loved, sitcoms. So I loved Frasier. And I thought Kelsey Grammer and David Hyde Pierce, I thought they were brilliant. Comedy to me was kind of this very broad thing that I didn't know what it was or how I would make a living at it. It seemed, incredibly unrealistic to make a living at comedy because it was something that was so happening somewhere else far away, And then as I, got older, I was an actor as a kid, and I did some, off-Broadway, off-Broadway. I toured around the country.
You came into the city.
Came into the city a lot. I toured with Annie Get Your Gun, which was, they had a touring version of that. But I was always in the city as an actor, and it didn't work.
Why? Why do you think it didn't work?
I had the same voice I have now at 7, and that's challenging. It's very hard for a director to...
I'll have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and some strawberry quick.
Yeah. It was very jarring because I was a cute kid, but then the director heard the voice, and he went, this is a bit much. And it didn't work, but it laid the groundwork and the foundation for the idea that I loved being on stage and I loved the entertainment business and I loved New York City. So eventually it led me out of Long Island into New York, pursuing stand-up comedy a decade later. But it was, the acting it worked in the sense that I was a part of a lot of really cool things, but it never got to that next level. I never booked a part that took me to L.A. or...
Do you think you could now? Do you want to?
I mean, I don't know that I could or couldn't. I think that I'm not the greatest actor. I'll be very honest. And
don't let that stop you.
It's actually stunning how bad I am.
I got a list of movies I want you to watch.
I'm pretty good at being me and being funny as me. But when I do auditions, I have friends run lines with me. It's stunning how not good I am. I'm surprised by how bad I am.
So. If you don't have that appetite. Then
I mean, we just did an audition. Eli Roth was doing a video game movie. He's a fan. He said, I want you to work. And we did. Me and my producer drilled 40 takes to get a really good take. They went with an older guy who, in Eli's words, was older and fatter and more Russian. And that's fair. But it takes me a while. But I think it's a possibility.
Well, the only reason I say explored is because there's something about certain comics that leads you to believe there's a kind of the root of the comedy is to some extent the trauma of some experiences from childhood.
Yeah.
Then both of those vents are there.
And can be
both of
used.
those vents have been installed.
Yeah.
When Seinfeld did this show, he said a line once that really got to me. He said, when I go out on stage, he said, I blow myself up, almost like a Macy's Day. He says, I make myself larger.
Right.
And all of my presence is kind of inflated and
Right.
larger. Is that true of you? Are you the same on stage as you are off stage?
No. I'm an exaggerated version of myself on
Right.
stage. I think I'm more animated on stage. I think off stage would be exhausting. You couldn't get through a dinner with me if I was
So you're not like Tom Arnold,
No, it's not the same. Right?
who's exactly the same on camera as he is off camera.
Really,
Yeah.
bless him. But I need some time to refuel, and I think that I use that off stage. And I think when people meet me, they're a little surprised. They go, "Oh, you're a little more scaled down." I go, "Yeah, well, of course."
Now, you talked about how your parents divorced and your mother was diagnosed with schizophrenia.
Mother's a schizophrenic.
And how did that play out?
She came to that later in life.
That was when you were how old?
I was in my late teens when it started to come out, when I started to go, there's something wrong. And then you learn about mental illness, and you learn that it's physical illness, essentially, right? And it's, there's treatments and things. It can't really be helped. And I have jokes about it, and I make fun of it. And I think to certain people, they'd hear that, and they go, well, that seems very callous or very cruel, but it's how I deal with it in the same way that many people deal with tragedies with humor. So I think I love my mother, and my mother, did great things for me, and I appreciate her.
Your father was gone.
And no, he was there. He's there.
They were still married.
They were still married. And
At that point, they got divorced eventually.
They got divorced.
How many siblings?
None.
You were an only child.
Just me.
Jesus Christ.
Just me. They wanted one person to experience it all. They didn't want to, spread it out. They wanted one guy to take all the fun of that Long Island upbringing with a schizophrenic mother.
For me,
Yeah.
my therapist said to me years ago, you don't want to recreate the pain
Right.
of what you experienced as a child. You're going to restage the play, but in your version of the play, you solve the problem that you couldn't
Right.
solve as a child.
Yeah.
I'm only mentioning that's something I carried over. What did you carry over?
I think I carried over a sense of chaos, a very unhealthy sense of chaos. I grew up in chaos, and to me, I'm very comfortable around it, right? I'm very comfortable. I mean, as you said, what's my address? Who knows, right? I mean, that's kind of a good idea.
my address.
I've moved every 6 months during the quarantine. I like new things and there's many frustrated realtors out there. I've left a lot of them in my wake, but I think, unfortunately, maybe I've tied a little bit of my creativity to the chaos. And there's a fear that the chaos is actually good, and the chaos is actually, it's fuel, and it's what I'm used to and what I know. And hearing you say it, that's actually a very interesting thing about recreating, those environments that we grew up in, and we learned to thrive in, we learned to survive in, and I could see myself doing that with a lot of some of the decisions I make.
How would you describe your style? Every comic has a style. Your own style, or who would you compare it to?
No, I think that it's certainly darker comedy, right? So it's dark comedy. There's a lot of different comedians. The problem with comedy is whenever you compare yourself to somebody, you're saying you're as good as them or anything, which is not true at all, right? So everyone hates doing that. I hate doing that.
Right.
But I do think somebody described it once. They said it's very dark in a light way, which I think is fun, right? There's darkness, but then there's also complaining about frozen yogurt. I think there's a way to experience the unpleasantness of the world in hopefully a light way that allows people to laugh at things that they wouldn't necessarily laugh at. And on days when they don't want to laugh, that to me is kind of what the show is about, what the stand-up's about, is that when people reach out to me and go, the show's gotten me through the last year, or your live show was so great, we're all so happy, we had a rough week and it made us happy. That's really good to me. I don't really want or need happy people in my audience. I need a challenge. I want someone coming in that needs to laugh. If you're 20 and
if
great,
they're drunk too, that helps.
I'd love them to be drunk. But if you're a model and you're 20, sometimes I go on stage at the Hollywood Improv. I look at the audience and everyone's 23 and a model, and I go, I don't know. I don't know about this because you don't need this and I don't need this either. I don't need you and you don't need me.
Right.
So we're on a bad date
You're all
here.
set.
You're all set. We're on a bad date. But that's okay too. But yeah, so I mean, I think that's the style. It's darkly funny in a light way.
Now, because you don't do sitcoms, you're not on a sitcom, you've had TV specials and so forth.
I've had things like that, yeah.
Comedy Central and that kind
Yeah,
of thing.
I've never booked a role on a recurring thing.
But so for you, stand-up is the main meat.
Well, it's stand-up and the podcast has gotten really big. It's
Got it.
Yeah, but that is
that
it.
stand-up thing is your calling card
It's big,
with the podcast.
That's right.
And when you do that, what is writing like for you? I mean, are you one of these guys that's walking around saying, squirrel, get the vasectomy, write that down, squirrel vasectomy.
No.
Are you constantly writing?
No, I think I have like interests. So I have these weird interests where I go, I'll read stuff and I'm interested in stuff. I have natural curiosity about a lot of weird things. And usually the things that interest me, I find funny. I find amusing because they amuse me. So whether it's a cryptocurrency now that I'm interested in, and I don't really have a hard position either way. I just find the world fascinating. I find that there's pictures of apes selling for $1 million online. This interests me. It seems like it's all about to collapse. And again, the darkness, the pain, running towards that. So stuff like that. I'll start writing about that. I'll start writing about what's funny about that to me. What's funny about an economy based on pictures of animals. Why is that funny to me? Why is that ridiculous? Why is that absurd? And I'll start writing about that. I'll start talking about it maybe on the show, and then I'll bring it to a comedy club eventually. But I'm not a guy, I don't have that skill set that some comedians have where they can look at the squirrel or something and go immediately, I have it immediately. I just I have interests.
You don't seek it, it comes to you.
Yeah.
You don't sit down and write.
Sometimes I'll write, but it'll be once I have an idea. I'll have an idea about brunch. I hate brunch, and I hate it, and I want to write about why I hate it. And I don't like Disney World. And I don't like people that go to Disney World without children. It's strange.
Yeah.
And I'll write about that, and I write about these things that interest me and things that might I look at something and go, that's not quite right. That's where it maybe starts. That's not quite right. A picture of an ape selling for $1 million. That's not quite right. Right? 2 35-year-olds at Disney World, not a kid in sight. Not quite right. Brunch, a bunch of these young, boozy, drunk professionals eating, French toast and complaining
Lobster
about
rolls.
wedding DJs.
Right.
Not quite right. So then I reverse engineer from that.
So the COVID, you were locked down in L.A.
We were locked down in L.A. It was fine because it was, the weather's great and you could walk outside. Compared to the New York lockdown, it was much better. We got away on the West Coast a lot easier in terms of weather and just the natural, kind of beauty of the area.
I'm not an L.A. person in terms of I hate being in a car.
Yes.
Having grown up on the island, and we're going to get to that in a second, being a New Yorker and a Long Islander, you love what about L.A.? Do you love being in a car and the bubble of being in a car?
I don't love being in a car. I do think that LA's new and different, for me as a guy that grew up in Long Island, grew up in New York. And I think there's a synergy there that is good for creativity. Again, the chaos, right? Again, the idea of like, okay, I'm happy and comfortable in one place. Let's move. Let's go somewhere else. Let's find a new circle of people.
I've done that.
Yeah, and so I enjoyed it, and I didn't think I'd like it as much as I do. It came as a surprise to me. And I trash it all the time because there's a lot of things worth trashing. But you learn to live with it. You pick a coast, and I think that it was good. I love the Comedy Store. I love the history. I love the idea of show business there, and I love the idea of people that are really focused on making things happen. But that also comes with the fact that you have a lot of fake, spineless, hollow, shallow human beings. That is tough, but you learn to love them.
Right.
You learn to love because we're all that in a way. We're all not, we're not as ugly and exposed as they are in LA. We're not as, naked in the sense of our ambition as they are. But I think that you learn to have a higher tolerance for that out there than you do. When I went there and everyone in New York was like, well, everyone there's fake and they pretend to like you. And I said, well, that sounds kind of nice. There's something that's nice about that. In the beginning, I hated that idea. Well, I don't want anyone to pretend to like me unless they love me. Now people go, hey, how are you? Great to see you. And I get in my car, I go, they hate me, but you know what? That was lovely. Right. So I think that there's I know for a fact they hate me.
It's a delightful phoniness.
But it was a nice little meal we had, and we were sitting near each other in the restaurant. So to me, you get to a point where you go, that's okay. And then in New York, immediately you land and people start unloading 20 years of problems on you immediately. Yeah. And you go, oh, here's the problem with reality.
I'm Alec Baldwin. You're listening to Here's the Thing. For a stand-up comedian, life on the road is a prerequisite. But not all stops on tour are equal. Tim Dillon shares with us his favorite places to perform.
I love Denver. It's a great comedy town, and everybody there's hiking and up and down mountains. Taking edibles. They're all relaxed. They're
ready to receive.
They're very healthy, but they're also off. They're off. There's something wrong when you look at them. I like Denver a lot. I love Chicago. My big markets are Boston, Chicago, Denver, places where, there are cultures and people that, enjoy comedy. And these are great towns and cities. But then I also have the privilege of going to other places, Portland, Maine, for example, a place I didn't know existed.
But I'm sure when you say Boston and Chicago, places where, let's be plain, where straight-talking white guys are a hit.
Well, they're a hit, but a lot of things are a hit. Comedy's a hit, right? Because there's places where straight-talking white guys are a hit, but comedy's not a hit.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Wyoming wouldn't work for me. And if you're a straight-talking white guy in Wyoming, you're a hit. But comedy doesn't work there because they don't get irony. They don't really get satire. They're not with it. Now, and God bless them, and I'm sure there's some lovely people that prove me wrong. But in mass, it's not a great state for comedy.
Now, was your family still on Long Island?
Oh, yeah. Why leave?
Your mother... Wasn't the world is divided between people who they'll write me on social media and say, well, I left Bayshore, I left Patchogue.
They've never left. They talk about
20 years ago, and they'll say, oh, no, I miss Robert Moses. I miss the beaches of Long Island. Then there's people who they're never leaving.
Right.
Never.
Well, my friend's mother was interesting. Every dinner we ever had, these were very good friends, and they take us on vacations, and we go to dinner. Every dinner we had, she talked about a condo in Naples. I mean, this was her dream, a condo in Naples. They're going to get a condo in Naples, and she'd drag her husband down to Florida, and they'd go endlessly look at condos in Naples, and this is all that she wanted. And then her husband sadly passed away, so I asked her, a few years ago, I said, are you ever going to get the condo in Naples? She goes, well, what would I do there? And I said, but that's all you talked about for your whole life. And then I realized, oh, that was the important thing. It was the idea that she could escape, but there was no escape.
Right.
So the idea is that many people...
option.
The option. Many people talk about leaving, but they never leave. My parents will never leave. They've talked about Georgia and the Carolinas. They've talked about the humidity and the nights in Charleston, but they're never going to leave.
When I was a kid, my dearest friends who lived in the house behind us on our block, and my best friends growing up until I was 9 years old, Kevin and Keith Cornelius were my best friends, and their father, Harold Cornelius, his name, they called him Hap. Hap Cornelius was a builder, and we're standing in my driveway, and he turns to my dad, he goes, we're selling the house, we're moving. And my dad's like, wow, you're kidding. He goes, yeah, we're going to sell. We're going to move out to Smithtown. And this is back in the 60s. And my father's like, wow, well, God, we're going to miss you and best of luck to you. Blah, blah, blah. And as he walked away, my dad turned to my mother and he goes, Smithtown, Jesus, that's Siberia, he said. Can you imagine?
Yeah, well, I think the attitude was back then it was intensely local. Yeah. Everybody was very local, and now everything's global. So now, like I have people that message me, a kid from Pakistan messaged me the other day, young kid, 15, he goes, I like your podcast because you make fun of your government. And I said, that's awesome. It was this amazing, mind-blowing moment, but it didn't even rock me. That's how global the world is right now. Later on that night, I sat back and I said to myself, I was like, you got to really think about how amazing that is, that moment that a teenager in Pakistan has somehow found the podcast and likes it because you're doing something that they may not be able to do, and he likes comedy and wants to be a comedian. And so to me, I go, that's a really wild thing, but it's such a global world that you don't stop and realize the magic of that the way you should.
Do you ever go back to the island?
Oh, yeah. We went back. I love the food, so I always go to a strip mall Italian restaurant and grab a bagel. Yeah, I love. Every now and then I'll drive through like Kings Point or Sands Point and look at the Gadsby era mansions, the old mansions.
Yeah.
I used to and I love the Hamptons. I go back every summer for at least 2 weeks. Then I rent a house and I loved it. And I swim at Cooper's Beach and I eat a bunch of seafood and I see friends and I love it. It's my favorite place in the world
to visit.
But then I have to go back to that hellish canyon on fire because it's the choice I've made.
Yeah.
And everyone I know who's bi-coastal is a little insane. Everyone in my business who tries to do both coasts is crazy. And I developed an affinity for Palm Springs during the quarantine too. A lot of history out there. Palm Springs got to be, this thing because you had to be, when the old contracts came out, you could never be more than 200 miles away from Paramount Studios. So Palm Springs is 199 miles away. It's just very interesting.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, no,
I love that.
And that's why this desert town became this really kind of beautiful, interesting, perfect, restored, mid-century modern estates and these really some old cars and a really kind of old Hollywood glam about it that was very interesting.
Sure.
And it transported you back to the 1950s when people, I think, were somewhat optimistic about America. Not everyone, but there was certainly a feeling of optimism, right? It was post-war. And you see that reflected in the architecture and just the urban planning in the city. You feel it and you go, this is what it feels like to build a city when things are going really well. Mm-hmm. And when people believe that, the cultural trends and everything are trending in the right direction. So I do like it out there. And I do think that I was too quick to dismiss it. It'll never be New York. It's not ever going to be New York.
It's apples and oranges.
And it's apples and oranges. But I've learned to like oranges.
Someone said to me once, they said, L.A. is just the chicest suburb in the world. It's not really a city.
Right.
They're right. City that doesn't have a real reliable, thriving public transportation system and so forth. Out there, very few people know who their congressman is. Very few people know who their state assemblyman is or whatever. They do know who their school board. It's a very school board-centered political fabric out there.
Yes.
All they care about is schools.
If you put a gun to my head, I couldn't tell you my congressman. I know every maitre d' of every restaurant. I know who's working Craig's. I know who's working, all the places I want to go. But who's at El Pastel?
When I'm in town, you come with. We're going to go to Craig's.
We're going to go to Craig's. I love Craig's.
That's where I saw Sidney Poitier when he died.
Really?
I wrote a little quick memento, and I saw online, and I said how I was in Craig's.
Yeah.
And I met him there. Oh,
nice.
I love Craig's.
I like it. I get into it. I think if you allow yourself to get into it, and you can.
Nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with that.
You are in the business, aren't you?
I'm in the business, and I get into it, and it's like, listen, it has its problems, sure. But at the end of the day, it's like what place doesn't? And, I tried a little bit of Austin, Texas during the quarantine, a hellish place.
Why? I got a lot of progressive friends, gay friends.
Yes. Well, there's
people who they love. It's the Republic of Austin. They love it.
But I'm a little spoiled by LA and New York.
Right.
So I need a tomato. You know what I mean?
Right.
I can't not have, there are certain things I like. I can't have 2 sushi restaurants that are booked out for a year. You know what I mean?
That's Austin?
Yeah, I need choices of places to eat and things to do and things to see.
Right.
It's, and then there's a lot of people there's a lot of people that live in Austin that didn't make it in New York or LA. Let's just be very honest. It is what it is. There's a little bit of a weirdness about that city that I think comes from the fact that it is a city that seems to cater to the unambitious. For up until recently when all the tech people are coming in there and they'll ruin it. But for right now, forever, it's been people whose art wasn't commercially viable, so they went to, get high and eat brisket. They should have that, but not for me.
Let me ask you, in the time we have, you've done Rogan's show.
11 times.
Right,
are people mad at him? I don't know. I haven't read the paper.
What did you think about, without commenting on him, I'm assuming he's a pal.
He's a big pal,
He's a pal. And what did you think about this whole Spotify thing?
Well, again, I think a mature country has to allow people to have conversations that are uncomfortable and difficult. And I do think that I love Joe. I know Joe. I'm an overweight guy who smoked and, drank and used drugs in his life. I was vaccinated the day it came out because I talked to a doctor and I went, this seems to make a lot of sense for me. I'm not going to gamble this.
You're sober.
Sober.
How long?
12 years.
I got 37 years this month.
Congrats.
And I don't really go
Yeah.
public too much about
Yeah.
that, but these days I don't
Yeah.
avoid it. What was your drug of choice?
Oh, I liked booze. I liked Coke too, but booze was the acceptable one.
Don't you downplay the Coke thing to me, you.
No, Coke was good, but then, booze was so acceptable from an Irish family.
Yes.
That I was able to
Booze is part of cuisine.
Yes, booze is part of
We
it all.
have to have wine.
Pair the wines.
The Chateaubriand.
Yeah. So what I think about that whole thing is like, listen, I think people should be able to have conversations. Joe is having conversations with people that have vastly different ideas about the way to handle coronavirus. I think that at the end of the day, when you have a controversial topic, I don't believe the best way to handle it is to shut down speech. I think you should talk more about it from more angles and get more views, more opinions. And that way you flesh everything out, you get it all out in the open, and then consensuses will emerge and people will start seeing the avenues of what's right and what's wrong. But to me, by shutting people down, it doesn't necessarily help, and it makes people somewhat paranoid. And they go, well, why are you not letting me listen to that person? And why are you preventing me from hearing this? I think a mature country has to be able to engage in those conversations, from all sides.
Comedian Tim Dillon. If you're enjoying this conversation, tell a friend. And be sure to follow Here's the Thing on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. When we come back, Tim Dillon shares with us why the many facets of his personality don't always make it into his act. I'm Alec Baldwin, and you're listening to Here's the Thing. When Tim Dillon was 25, he made several transformative decisions after being called for jury duty. It would ultimately change the course of his life.
I was a juror in a murder trial.
Did you go the whole distance?
Yeah. It was 2 weeks in Long Island, murder and torture. Absolutely great for me. A huge learning experience. It was I couldn't afford going on like a
The murder and
retreat.
torture. Well, but I want to give you a chance to rephrase it. The murder and torture case wasn't great for you.
The experience was great for
The
me.
experience of being on the jury was great for you.
Absolutely.
I'm trying to help you out here, pal.
Someone was there we go. See, I've stepped in it again.
Yeah.
Someone was going to have to sit in that box, and I did. And it made me really look at my life at 25 and go, I haven't gone after what I wanted to go after, which is being a comedian and making people laugh. And, the jury, I would make them laugh every day during lunch, and they would go, we hear the most horrible things every day, but you're really funny. And have you ever thought of, doing comedy? I go, yeah, I think about it. I've never done it. So after that trial, I really started, living the way I wanted to live.
So you were still using and drinking.
I was still drinking during the trial. I forget what the trial was really
You bring
about.
a flask out.
Yeah, I didn't
You bring
really-
your lunch pail.
Yeah, I didn't pay too much attention. He seemed guilty.
Yeah, right.
I didn't really, I didn't like the look of him, the way he
Yeah.
kind of just scowled.
Yeah.
But no, I was...
He seemed guilty.
He seemed guilty. He seemed odd. And I'm like, well, why would he even be in the room if he's not guilty? But so, life plus 50. And he, no.
Was he found guilty?
He was very guilty. He was actually incredibly guilty. The only thing that wasn't...
Who did he kill?
The mother of his children. And he stalked her. He was a bad guy. And I didn't feel bad putting him away. I would have hated to do a jury, and I wouldn't have done it if it was like a drug dealer or somebody who makes a mistake and does something that they shouldn't have done. This was a guy who was a hardened criminal who stalked and killed a woman. Go away, no problem there.
Yeah.
But, through that experience, I learned that I had a talent for humor and I should sober up.
You killed in the jury room.
I was the guy. It was so fun for people to be a part of this. And people still message me and go, great week of my life. Great week of my life. So to me, it's a test of your comedic ability to kind of go in there where every day it's murder, torture, lacerations. And for me to go in there and just kind of, again, a breath of fresh air. As soon as I heard that it was going to be a big, high-profile trial, I didn't want to get out. I said, let me stay in, because I knew that it was going to be impactful. So
You're curious.
I answered questions that would get me in, like when the prosecutor said, so we've looked up your name, because when they get serious, they run your name. And she goes, you've had your license suspended. You must hate the cops. And I said, well, I didn't pay my tickets. I hate myself for being irresponsible. And I'd just sit back, and then, the DA would look and go, oh, okay. And then the defense attorney would come up, and she'd go, murder and torture. How can you be impartial when you hear these things? And I'd go, they're just words. I've seen no proof. So I finally got it. it was my best audition, and I got it, and it changed my life, you know? I left that going, wow, life is short, you got to do what you want.
Now, you are, sexuality-wise, you identify as gay.
Yes, I identify.
But do people say to you...
I don't seem like I am.
What I'm saying is that I don't want to... I'm glad you said that.
No, that's fair.
No, you said that.
You
just canceled yourself.
I said it.
You just said that. But
I said it.
But my point is that do people in the gay community say, you're not gay enough?
No, but outside of the gay community, they do. In the gay community, there's all different types of gay people. On television, there's one type.
You think I don't know that?
You know that, but I'm saying that there's a lot of, I think, there's casting. So they cast somebody as gay.
Right.
They cast, and it's usually, a young, good-looking, somebody in the design and very stylish and whatever. But that's not. It's a big community, and I'm out of, and I have, my comedies about who I am and honesty and all that shit. So I don't care about anything. But I think the gay community is a lot broader than people think. And
but you don't play it up in your comedy.
I don't play it up, but I
have friends who I won't comment on who are very funny, but they clearly want it, they want it clear.
Right.
And I'm going to do a set of gay comedy.
Yes. I have a few jokes about it, but not a ton. It's well known if you're a fan of mine. But yeah, I've never felt it to be the funniest thing. Whereas... yeah, I've never felt it to be the funniest part of me.
When it works, and when it doesn't, you leave it out.
Yeah, I just never felt like some people, it is why they are interesting. And that's not me. Some people, it is why they are different or where their perspective is completely from. There's nothing wrong with that in the slightest. But with me, I think I have a lot of different things going on. And, it's a part of my identity.
There's only one tell.
Yeah.
There's only one clue.
Was my mention of Eggs Benedict?
No, exactly. No. That's
my
the
7
second
minutes
one.
of discussing Eggs Benedict in the Beverly Hills Hotel.
That was a close second to when you said Palm Springs. Because all my friends who are gay have homes in Palm Springs.
Gay people like the desert. We don't like the woods.
They love Palm Springs.
Lesbians like woods.
Yeah.
So a lot of lesbian friends of mine.
Palm Springs is
beautiful.
the West 12th Street of California.
A lot of gay people in Palm Springs.
Very good.
And old people who are in their 90s and 100s.
Now, I want to finish with this.
Yes.
First of all, we didn't get to Long Island, but that doesn't matter.
That's okay. You know what? We've both done enough for Long Island. You more than me. But
I drove my wife out there.
You love it out there.
We go to my
you
hometown. We live in East Hampton.
Right.
But we go out there. I take my wife to Massapequa. We go to Massapequa a lot.
Yeah.
But I took her out here this past summer, and we drive through. And we do my drive. We go down Wanto Parkway. We go to Jones Beach, and here's Gilgo, and there's the water tower, and here's where I was a lifeguard, and there's Fire Island. And we go through Massapequa, and we get to my neighborhood I grew up in.
Yeah.
And we go down into the bowels, into the south where the canals are and the water streets.
Sure.
Yeah, so and we go by a house. Now, you would have thought this place, it was a business. They had so many Trump and QAnon flags fluttering. It was a windy day. And literally, you couldn't have designed it. Steven Spielberg couldn't have filmed it better.
Right.
All these things are flapping and pulsating in the wind. Trump, QAnon, from my cold, dead hands.
Right.
They must have had 100 of them on the lawn.
Yeah.
And my wife said to me, she goes, "This is where you're from?" I said, we really didn't have this when I was a kid.
It's wild. I think it's always been a conservative place, but it's now loudly political, where it's like everybody.
It's Trumpsters.
It's loudly political. And I find that the politics and geography is the most depressing thing to me because I want to like or hate a place on its merits. If you're a surfer and if you love Trump and you're a surfer, you can't live in Texas. There's certain parts of the country that make sense for certain lifestyles. And now that everything's become so crazy, I have friends in Florida now that are like, well, we're here because it's free and we love Trump. It's like, no, you're there because you retired at 32. You know what I mean? You're there because you just want to drink all day and God bless you. There's nothing wrong with that. Don't tie it into politics.
Right.
You just want to get drunk on your boat.
But I believe that people, I'll look at people and I'll say, not if you got to know me, really. There's no way you can get to know me through social media or through the business. If you got to know me, if you knew me, you'd like me, but we'd at least stand a chance. The way things are, there is no chance.
Right.
And I'm in Montana shooting a movie, and the weekend comes, and I don't have my chargers with me. I'm walking around my hotel. I'm I usually have a bag full of my chargers. I got to go to the Best Buy. I call up Uber. The guy comes and picks me up at the hotel in a huge pickup truck.
Right.
With a back cab, a second row.
Yeah.
And I get inside and I sit there and I said, "I'm so sorry." I said, "Where is this place?" He said, "It's on the other side of town." And I go, real tough cowboy guy, probably 60.
Yeah.
And he goes, it's on the other side of town. He goes, well, this time of day on a weekend, it shouldn't be too bad. He said, the traffic. He said, it's being Sunday morning, because the place opened at 10.
Right.
And I go, great. And I said, I don't know this town. I'm here visiting. And he literally goes, you're visiting town? He goes, you're not here for that Alec Baldwin film, are you? And I, so help me God, I got my sunglasses on and my mask. And I go, no, what's that? He goes, well, they're shooting some film here with that Alec Baldwin. There's a pause. And he goes, I can't stand him. He's a liar. And a wife beater. Right. He names all this shit that they've accused me of, none of which is true. And he goes, I can't stand him. I go, really? I go, wow. I mean, I know who he is. I know his films, but I didn't know he was. He's all those things. He said, yeah, I just can't stand him. Then there's a pause. He puts the music on, some country music, and we get to the Best Buy and we pull up, and his name is like Doug or something. Right. It's on his license, and I take out my license and I go, Doug, I am Alec Baldwin. And I hold up my license and give it to him through the screen. Yeah. And he takes my license, looks at it, and he looks at me in the rearview mirror and he goes, Jesus Christ, you are Alec Baldwin. And I said, Doug, you can't believe everything you read about people. I said, I'm just asking you to consider that a lot of what you read, it's just fucking nonsense. I mean, it's clickbait for people who want to sell things. I said, and it really isn't true. He says, well, you may be right. I read a lot of this stuff, and I don't know what's true. Right. I don't know what's true. I go, well, you just tell people that you drove me in the cab and that we had a nice conversation or what have you. There's just no hope of how do you permeate that and get people to understand who you really are. Let me finish with this, which is that I want you to really consider acting.
Well, that's very kind of you to say.
I want you to consider acting. I'll tell you why.
I would like the studios to consider me acting.
But I'd like you to consider. I'll tell you why. Because one thing people can't fake, which is very important in some roles you play. One thing people have or don't have that you can't fake is authority. Yeah. And if you have that authority, you can go do 12 Angry Men. Right. You could do The Sky's the Limit when you have the intellectual velocity you have, the verbal facility that you have with words, and the authority. You could play the Lee J. Cobb role in On the Waterfront.
Well, I appreciate that.
You should really think about that.
I'm going to think about it.
You can't buy that.
I am going to think about it. I do hope that, more things come down the pike. I mean, that is...
Do you have an agent for the movies?
Yeah, CAA. We have all the same people.
You should go.
I have all the big
Go
people.
make some movies. You should make some. You really should act.
All right. Well, hey, I appreciate it.
It would be self-robbery if you don't, because you got a great quality to you.
Well, I appreciate it. And thank you very much.
My thanks to comedian Tim Dillon. He'll be back on the road making people laugh this spring. Check out his upcoming tour dates at timdilloncomedy.com. This episode was recorded at CDM Studios in New York City. We're produced by Kathleen Russo, Zach McNeese, and Maureen Hoban. Our engineer is Frank Imperial. I'm Alec Baldwin. Here's the Thing is brought to you by iHeart Radio.